when I was a kid, to hear new music and new bassists, you had to go out and buy an album, or somebody would tell you about it, or maybe you saw someone on TV. And now kids are finding their heroes on Instagram and YouTube. I had a kid come and start studying with me virtually this summer because he loved Davey 504 videos.
Today's conversation was one of those that made me realize just how small the musical world is, and certainly the double bass world. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we're talking today with Paul Thompson, who is a Pittsburgh area bassist educator. He's done all kinds of things, teaches at Duquesne. He used to tour with Maynard Ferguson, and since the pandemic broke out, he has been focusing on his YouTube channel, which is kind of the reason for this conversation, although Paul is somebody that I should have had on the podcast years ago. Anyway, I've been focusing on YouTube also during this pandemic, and it was so fun to connect with Paul and talk everything from cameras to how he's utilizing this medium, where he sees it going in the future. You gotta check out Paul's YouTube channel. It is one of my favorite, not only double bass YouTube channels, but just one of my favorite YouTube channels in general. Anytime a new video comes out, I am clicking it, I am watching it, I'm learning so much about Paul, about how he thinks about music, about jazz, about YouTube, just so many things. What a great human being. I had such a great time chatting with Paul. I think that'll come through in this conversation. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, Practisma, and Modacity. More on them later, but let's get into this conversation with Paul Thompson.
Can you hear me now?
Now we're good. This is the way all human interactions work in late 2020. Can you hear me now?
Right.
How's it going? How are you doing?
Great. It's so great to meet you, Jason. I've been a fan of the podcast for some time now, and it's so great to meet you. What you're doing is so wonderful, and I don't know if you get to hear it enough. There's a lot of us out here that love it. We look forward to new episodes. We love your interviewing style. It's very personal, and you've brought us all together. You brought our community closer together. So it's wonderful. Oh, that's awesome, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's fun. I don't know how I got started doing this thing, but here we are. But I love where you're located in the country. I'm a huge Pittsburgh fan. My last trip before the pandemic was Pittsburgh. I was in Pittsburgh for Micah Howard's bass symposium, and I went into a couple of the public schools, and I was doing some clinics. This is like March 2nd, which seems hilariously close. I think we shut down like March 9th or something here in San Francisco. So, and I was just, happy-go-lucky Jason, not a care in the world, hanging out, doing that. Flew back to San Francisco, and that was the last time I've really seen very pretty much anybody. So, yeah, I know. But it's funny because have you spent much time? I know you've done all kinds of things tour-wise and that sort of thing. Have you spent a lot of time in San Francisco and the Bay Area, or come through here? No, I've been to San Francisco one time, and it was on the road with Maynard Ferguson, and we were kind of in a motel on the outskirts of the city, and somebody had to tell me. It was one of those periods in the tour where it was like, where are we at right now? And somebody said, oh, we're outside of San Francisco. That was my only time there. My wife laughs about it because she loves San Francisco, and I haven't seen the Bay Bridge. I would love to visit San Francisco at one point and just do a little tourist kind of trip there.
Well, it's hilariously similar just geographically to Pittsburgh, believe it or not. You go if you're coming from the airport in Pittsburgh and you go through that tunnel, which I'm blanking on the name of the tunnel, and then it opens up and you see everything, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Four Pit Tunnel. We live just through the tunnel, and if you go up the hill, there's about 2 exits. That's where our house is.
Wow,
right through the tunnel.
What a beautiful setting. It's funny because I've only been to Pittsburgh in early March, and so it looks like San Francisco, but something horrible happened because it's all brown and everything. So I need to go there in the summer, but it's so similar in terms of the setting and the hills and just the geography of the place, and so I'm a fan. I can't wait to get back there whenever the heck the next time is. So, well, we can meet you in person one of these days.
Definitely. Definitely, man.
Wow. So it's funny. I put out this
I put out this video maybe a couple weeks ago, just talking about some people that are doing cool stuff on YouTube. And then a few people commented and said, have you checked out what Paul's been up to? Which I hadn't. And then I went way down the rabbit hole of what you're doing. And it's really, well, I think we've sort of been inspired to, like, you know, spend more time making some content. And it's cool because like you, I kind of have had this old YouTube channel that I've put stuff on over the years. I always think of it as like a garbage fire for me. I just like dump stuff on there. But man, congrats on what you're doing. I love. Please, I keep it up. You're one of the people that as soon as a new video comes out, I check it out. It's really excellent what you're doing.
Oh, I really appreciate it, man. It took me a while to kind of get the ball rolling in my process. Really. Like you said, when the lockdown started, it was almost like the universe was telling me, yeah, it's time. I had bought a camera the previous year. I bought a camera in 2019 with the hopes of maybe starting something, and I never got around to it. I tried to shoot something in my studio here and see how it looked and how it sounded, and I never moved past that point. And then the lockdown happened, and it was like, I have to start doing this. And so I didn't even start doing the vlogging and the episodes. That was in my head, that kind of concept, but I just started putting a camera up and saying, okay, I have to start this YouTube ball. So I started just doing a bass solo every day, like as part of my practice. I'm just going to pick a standard and play it every single day. And it started rolling, and then I got called for a gig sometime in late May, I want to say, like near Memorial Day, because outdoor stuff started happening. And so I thought, let me grab my camera. I'll vlog about this. This could be my first kind of non-playing episode, and that kind of got the ball rolling for me.
That's awesome. That's great. It's funny because I had a similar impulse in 2019. I said, I need to do more. I was filming these videos on my iPhone. I was just thinking, I am so sick of this garbage footage I'm getting from my iPhone. You know, it's like, and so I bought a camera, bought a few lenses, and then as things happen, as things typically, not in 2020, but typically happen, you know, the fall hit, I got busy and I filmed a few videos, and then all of a sudden I found myself trapped inside for now 10 months, I guess, or whatever. And so I started to spend some more time doing it. And I don't know, there's something about not being able to perform that I think, or appear in public or anything like that sort of scratched that itch to an extent for me.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I found there's something creatively that I love about it. I really love it. It's so much work. Even just the standard video, it's so much work, but it's so satisfying. It's like, it's very similar to music, how you birth a song or you birth a solo, the work that goes into it and the fruit from that. It's so enjoyable. And I'm not doing it on a level where I'm even, you know, really making any money. I had one video that went viral thanks to bassist Will Lee. If you saw my videos, there's one video that has a ridiculous number of views, and that's because Will Lee saw it. I think I put part of it on Instagram and I tagged him, but he shared it on social media. And then that started this ball where I just hit the algorithm like a wave. And now that video, it was about a Donald Fagen album, the bass playing on a Donald Fagen album called The Nightfly. And now it's to the point where the algorithm, if you ever searched Steely Dan on YouTube, if you've ever searched Steely Dan, it's going to push my video up and say, check this out.
Well, it's incredible.
Which is really amazing.
Well, that's the cool thing about doing content on a platform like that, is that you don't know what's going to pop off like that. And
oh, totally.
And there's this evergreen factor to doing things on YouTube. It's so cool because like you, I find it creatively interesting and fun and a challenge. Mm-hmm. And then if we fast forward 5 years from now, 10 years from now, being able to put that sort of thing that you're doing out there, it's just going to impact so many people that it's hard to even know right now. I mean, I've had a few videos do similar things over the years, and I have this hilarious bunch of videos from like 2007. They look like they were filmed in the Stone Age, you know. But one of them has like 250,000 views. views. It's just me with my 2-megapixel Canon Pixma, like holding it in my hands. It's like you can hear all this background. But it's interesting how that. So it's cool to know that. So you're into it and finding the process fun. So let me just ask you some super nerdy questions, just from one person do this. So, what are you using camera-wise? What are you using to edit? I just love to know.
Sure.
Personally.
I'm using a Canon Rebel SL2.
Nice.
That was when I started. I did some research before I started the channel. I started asking people questions. I was a big fan of Rick Beato, and I loved Adam Neely's videos. But I saw that there wasn't a lot of jazz double bass content happening, and I didn't see frankly I didn't see a lot of people of color either. And I wanted to get out there, and so I started asking people, and I do gigs and I work with like camera people, and I walk up to them and what's the best camera if I'm going to do this, and a few of them said all those Canon Rebels are great. Wow. So I got the SL2, and then I thought, if I'm going to do this talking head thing, I tried to do a thing where I would record the sound and the video separately, and it was just too much for me. So I got a good shotgun mic, which is a Deity V3, which it kind of mounts on the camera. It sounds decent. If I need to do any good sound, then I'll usually record the sound separately, but I'm using, I've been going into GarageBand until last week. I've been using GarageBand and iMovie. And the last video I put up, the Jazz Goggle Box thing, where I'm kind of watching myself play and evaluating myself, that was my first video with Final Cut Pro, which is like so great. If you've been working with iMovie for 8 months, it's amazing. But that's all I'm using.
Wow, you should be an ad for iMovie. What you've done on iMovie, that's incredible. That's super cool. I also went down the camera rabbit hole. I've been using a Canon M50. Which has been, and I've been using a Rode VideoMic Pro mounted on the camera. And it's funny because I've owned it seems like every lavalier mic I buy breaks immediately. So I've done that, but there's something about just being able to like have that on the camera and go that it like eliminates some of the barriers that might make me like not get the idea out.
Yeah, totally. And
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, it also really helped when it came. I had to get through this stage where I was just making bass videos every day. That was me getting in the pool, and I needed something that I could just put up, hit record, and go. That was another reason I needed a mountable mic that sounded decent.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, and one of the things that attracted me so much to this app is the beautiful user interface. Here's Daniel Spreadbury, Senior Product Manager, on how they thought about designing this user interface.
It was building on that idea of having everything in its place and a place for everything, basically, and not just throwing everything at the screen and hoping that you'd be able to find your way through it.
I have become a true fan of Dorico. I have the full version. I use it every single day. I use it in my lessons. I use it for... I have become such a fan of Dorico. I use it every single day. I use it in my lessons. I use it for making arrangements and exercises and everything like that. There is a free version, SE, Dorico SE, and you can do everything practically that the full version of the software lets you do. So if you're doing arrangements for a student, duets, or anything like that, or exercises, that is perfect for you. Dorico.com will take you to their page on Steinberg's website, and I can't say enough good things about them. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Practisma Practice Journal. And here's Practisma author Susanna Klein on why journaling is so important for practicing.
It's a little trick to make the invisible progress visible, or to get you to recognize, hey, things are still slow going, but I'm doing the right thing.
I'm a big fan of this journal. I've gone through all 16 weeks myself on my own personal journey. It is so cool what Susanna's created. It's packed with research-based strategies to turn your ho-hum practice into extraordinary practice, and it really works. Learn more at Practisma.com, where you can download the introductory chapter of the journal for free. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Well, in addition to like the footage always looking terrible on my iPhone, which maybe I just don't know how to use it, the process of transferring that from my iPhone to the computer was just annoying enough that it would make me not want to do it. So just like having it on an SD card, it just eliminated, and it seems like a little thing, but if you're trying to do like what you're doing or what I've been trying to do, that those little barriers can just be the thing that makes you think, I'm just not going to do it today.
Totally.
I decided in summer 2019, I was just going to start doing Adobe Creative Cloud for better or for worse, and just like go in. And I've never used Adobe products really. I mean, I had like a pirated Photoshop back in the early 2000s, and that's been a steep learning curve. But I've been doing Premiere Pro and then getting more into Photoshop and After Effects. And I'm on a new tear, which has not come out yet, but it's going to come. I'm going to try to film it today. I've been doing these like stupid bass history is what I might end up calling it. It's like bass history, so I've been cutting out these bass figures in Photoshop and animating them in After Effects, and I've got them dancing to dubstep and all sorts of
awesome.
madness. So we'll see what that looks like. My wife laughs every time I share a clip, so I'll try to get that happening by the weekend. But man, that's so cool that you're doing. I really love. Please keep it up, because it's the world. I feel like the world needs what you're doing, and it's just a really interesting window into what you do and jazz. And I'm not surprised. All your videos should be getting 80,000 views, like the one that Will Lee shared out. It's really incredible what you're doing.
You're much too kind, but I have to say, as a creator, I'm seeing this thing now where you, like the last video I did, I was so excited about the idea, and I thought this is going to be so great. Without fail, the video that I put the most work into, other than the Will Lee thing, the videos I put the most work into and I think are going to be so great usually don't get a ton of views.
Yes.
And anything with jazz in the title, which some other people, I think Rick Beato talked about this. You put jazz in the title, immediately people are like, nope, I'm not interested. So I'm trying, but I feel part of it, I feel like, is kind of my legacy. I don't have any children, and I want to, this is the new thing. This is the way. When I was a kid, to hear new music and new bassists, you had to go out and buy an album, or somebody would tell you about it, or maybe you saw someone on TV. And now kids are finding their heroes on Instagram and YouTube. I had a kid come and start studying with me virtually this summer because he loved Davey 504 videos, and that's how they're getting bass playing now. That's how information is being transmitted. So I felt like I need to get in this game, because this is the new kind of, here's my CD. Back when 25 years ago was you make a CD and this is how people know who you are. This is the new way to communicate with people.
Oh, you bet. For better or for worse, and I love Davey 504, he may have done more for the bass than anybody. I mean, holy cow.
Totally.
Is that like over 8 million people? 8 million people,
yeah.
Thinking about the bass in some capacity. I would love, hopefully at some point in life, all three of our paths will cross.
Yeah.
I would love to meet him in real life and just see what he's like.
Totally.
But it was so cool. And one of my favorite collaborations, just because of my background, was this two-set violin, his collab videos and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Well, what you're doing is what I wished I could have had when I was, 18, 19, 20, whatever, because it's such a cool window. It's like what I was trying to get by going to the music library and checking out books and reading things and going through. It's so cool to see. Anyway, keep it up, man. It's really excellent.
Thanks, man. I'm just trying to, I studied with a bunch of great mentors, a bunch of great teachers, and I'm just trying to pass on the stuff that they passed on to me. In fact, we have mutual acquaintances. I'm not sure if you knew this or not. I'm sure. I lived in Chicago my junior year of high school, which was a long time ago. But my junior year of high school, and I met a guy there who was one of the greatest influences on my whole being, a guy named Reggie Willis, who was a bass player in Chicago for many years, and he started teaching at Curie Metro. And so my mom took a sabbatical as a teacher. We moved to Chicago for that year, and I hooked up with Reggie through, mutual friends, and I started going to Curie. We lived, if you know where the Berwyn L stop is, we were like 2 stops away from the Green Mill on the Red Line. So that's where we lived. I went to Curie, which was like what's the airport down in the south?
Midway.
Midway. Curie's like near Midway Airport. So I used to take that trip every day to go to school. Like it was an L to the Loop, bus to Curie, like 45-minute bus ride to Curie, and then the bus ride back, and then the L home every day, so I could like hang with this guy Reggie Willis. And there were 3 of us. There was a pianist and a guitarist and myself, and we would stay after school till 7:30 at night, and he would play us records and show us scales, and we would try to play things, and he would take us out to jazz clubs. He took us to Von Freeman's place at the New Apartment Lounge that session. He took us to the Jazz Showcase to see Art Farmer. Art Farmer was like the first jazz musician I ever saw in person, with Ira Coleman on bass. He was the first, he introduced me to Rufus Reed. Anyway, he was like one of my huge mentors, and he kind of was backing away from playing the bass. And so he hooked me up with Larry Gray. He was like, you need to study with Larry Gray. So I took a couple of lessons with Larry, who totally was, I still think he's one of the greatest gems that people don't know about. He's unbelievable. One of the greatest musicians I've ever been around. But I'm sure you know him. So I know some people. I'm sure we know some people. I know Christian Dillingham, who you've had on the show.
Oh yeah, well because he spent some time in Pittsburgh too.
He's a Pittsburgh guy. Yeah. So I knew him before he left, and he's a wonderful guy. He got that great new gig now, which I'm so happy for him. So we know some of the similar people, I think.
After several years of planning, I'm so happy that my course, Beginner's Classical Bass, is out on Discover Double Bass. This course is made up of 66, yes, that's a lot, video lessons which cover a wide range of topics on classical double bass, starting from taking your bass out of the case, which is very fun to film, and Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and I have a great blooper reel about that, and leading to different bow strokes such as staccato and portato. The topics also include posture, simple scales and arpeggios, left-hand technique, bowing technique, simple pieces which are fun to play, practice tips, and much more. You can learn more through the link in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble.bass.com/Jason Heath. There are so many things to think about when you're practicing. Where do you even begin? Here is Modacity founder and CEO Mark Gelfo on what to prioritize in your practicing.
First things first, you got to measure time. Time is of the essence. You want to get the highest return on your time investment. And the way to do that is through listening to yourself and self-recording. Almost everybody who reads the blogs of Rob Knopper, Noah Kageyama, everybody knows self-recording is absolutely essential. So we put it front and center along with time.
Recording yourself, measuring the time you've spent on particular sections, and so many other things are available in Modacity. I love this app so much. You can learn more at modacity.co. And if you visit our website, we've got a special offer for lifetime access to the app. Check it out. You'll love it. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity.
It's such a small world. Well, Christian and I were playing in a bass quartet for a bunch of years. It's funny because we had this great bass quartet, and none of us had any ability to get gigs. It was funny because we would rehearse, and then we'd sit around drinking beer after the rehearsal and be like, "How do we get gigs? Does anybody know it?" It was one of the Chicago Symphony bassists, Michael Hovnanian, and then Christian and a couple other people, and it was just so hilarious. Like, oh yeah, I think there's this place in Lincoln Park. Maybe they have music every once in a while. And like, while I was in the band, we never got a gig, but we had a great time working on music. So hopefully they've gotten some gigs since I left. But yeah, you're taking me back. I moved to Chicago in 1994 and went to Northwestern, and I had a friend who was at Columbia College as a film major, so she was always inviting me into the city to go to the jazz showcase, which was I probably wouldn't have gone nearly as much if I hadn't had that friend, because it's like take the L from Evanston. But I was going to the jazz showcase when they were in the Blackstone Hotel on Michigan Avenue. Yeah, nice. And then I followed them up to Grand Avenue a little bit north, and then
for a few years, they have relocated for a while now to this area called Printers Row, and I moved about a half a mile from the Jazz Showcase and was living in a townhouse my last few years in Chicago. So I would just walk to the, my wife and I would go out and be like, you want to go to the Jazz Showcase? Sure. So I would go to the Jazz Showcase like all the time, it felt like. And so it was such a, and the Green Mill, I have so many great memories.
Yep.
Patricia Barber had probably still has, or in normal times, a regular gig there. And I would go there and check it out. And man, what a cool city. That's so cool that you spent some time there. And Reggie, I think he brought some students to a bass festival that I was doing in Wisconsin. This is back in the mid 2000s.
Wow.
So I might be wrong on that. Reggie, apologies if you check this out. But yeah, no, it's such a small world. That's crazy.
Yeah, he was such a great mentor, and he did so much for me personally, and I know he did so much for so many other young musicians coming up. When I met him, I was listening to fusion music mostly, and so I was like, I'm a jazz bass player, and he was basically like, no, you're not. I was into Return to Forever, and Stanley Clarke and John Patitucci were my guys, and he basically brought me into a room in his house. He lived in Hyde Park at the time that was all records, and he was like, here's some Miles Davis. Now here's John Coltrane. Here's Duke Ellington. Here's this guy, Oscar Pettiford. I remember him giving me the tune Tricketism, and he was like, you have to learn this song, because if you're going to be a jazz bass player, you have to learn it. He really showed me what the music was about. He really, and he's so great like that with kids. He took me, here's a memory I have, and this predates you, but when I was in high school, he took me and somebody else they used to do this bass day at Northwestern when Jeff Bradidich was there.
Oh yeah, sure.
And he took me, I remember him like, we're going to go check this out. And I was watching people play concertos, and I was like, this is amazing. I've never heard anything like this. And I met Jeff afterwards, and it was amazing. Like, he threw me into this world of music. He used to have a saying like, are you living with the music? Always. And he taught me to live with the music and to just kind of jump in the pool. And it's wonderful.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, it's funny. So Jeff again, another name to bring. So I moved to Chicago to study with Jeff Bradidich because he was still teaching at Northwestern, and then I get a phone call a month before school. Jeff says, "Hey, I'm leaving Northwestern and going to Texas, and you should follow me." And I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so I was really excited to go to Northwestern, but also to move to a big city and to take in. And I thought, Denton, Texas, that doesn't sound like Chicago. I think not. So for better or for worse, I just decided to stay, and I ended up having a good experience. But yeah, it was incredible. I remember meeting Jeff when I was in high school. I went to his bass workshops that he had during the summer, a couple summers, and yeah, it was really incredible. It's so cool that Reggie was located in Hyde Park. I lived in Hyde Park for 2 years. My wife went to the University of Chicago for medical school, and we moved down to Hyde Park, and we moved down there not too long after Obama got elected. It was maybe 2009 we moved there, and it was so interesting to move to that neighborhood and see all these signs in the windows. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
I ran into I was with my parents, and we were in line at this great Greasy Spoon Diner that had forever, and Jesse Jackson was in line behind us. And my dad, that was like the greatest moment of his life. He's like, "That's Jesse Jackson." And it's like, that's how, and that may have been my favorite place I've ever lived for a bunch of reasons. Just that area of the city is really interesting. It was really interesting as a Polish American dude from South Dakota to actually, for the first time in my life, be in the minority. I would go to a grocery store and I was not and that was the only time in my life, including now, that I've had that experience.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. But just that community is so interesting in so many ways, and it was also cool in that moment in time. I lived literally on the street that Obama lived. I was in this high rise, and I could see Obama's house if I looked out my west-facing window, and it was so interesting to have that. If you walked by his house at that time and you stopped, the Secret Service would like chase you away, and so it was really interesting. But I have so many good memories of that neighborhood and the beauty of that neighborhood, and just like the history of that part of town in general. It's really cool that Reggie was located there.
Yeah, he lived in a kind of building that had like 3 or 4 units in it. So I remember going up the steps to his place. I remember he had this awful shag carpet, like from like 1974, and that you would take your shoes off, like this, you know. And I would buy back then. You know, you had some CDs, but I had a lot of tapes. So I would go to the drugstore and buy these boxes of like 10 Maxell blank tapes. And so I would go over his house on the weekends with these boxes of Maxell tapes, and we would play bass. He would show me some things or a video, and I would just be recording albums in the other room. Like I would go in and flip, like he just gave it all to me, you know?
Isn't that incredible to think about that, and now to think about our access to music in 2020? Because I can relate to that, you know, totally. And I remember like going to the library and like picking up whatever Mozart CDs, Tom Martin, Bottazzini CDs, and going home and, you know, putting on cassette and then rewinding the cassette and listening. And now I like pull up my phone, click, and I'm like disappointed if there's not a YouTube video of it that I can't see if I have to just listen to the audio, you know. But it's incredible. My college work study job was the music library at Northwestern, and it's this great 19th century building, and all the walls of the music library are jazz records. It's nothing but jazz records, LPs.
Wow.
So I would spend my time, you know, that's a job where like one person comes in an hour a lot of the time. So I would just like go through and I'm going to pull 50 Duke Ellington records and just like look through them and hold them up. And I just think about that. Obviously it's so cool to be able to just click and listen, but that the patina of the albums and like experiencing that, it makes me think about what it's like for people growing up without that. I mean, positives and negatives for sure. And what you're doing is an example of the positives, but I can't help but think about how different it must be for people who don't have that sort of analog experience with the music.
Oh, totally. I get frustrated if you tell a student, you know, go listen to Speak No Evil by Wayne Shorter. What they'll do is they'll say, okay, I added it to my Spotify, you know, and you know they're going to listen to it, but how much are they going to be into it? You used to have to call a record store. Do you have Speak No Evil? No, we'll order it. Then they would call you back. We have it in stock. Then you have to get on a bus and actually go somewhere and pay money for it. And then on the bus home, you couldn't listen to it. You would read every single liner notes, and you knew exactly who the executive producer was and who the engineer was, and the notes about the music. And then you get home and you would listen to it 10, 20, 50 times because you paid for this thing. So you knew it intimately, you know, and that's how we took in music. It wasn't this kind of check this out, great, okay, on to the next thing, you know.
Well, you know, I was talking to Linda O maybe 3-4 months ago, and her latest album, she has come out with this kind of a what amounts to like an LP size thing that you can fold out, and so you order that, and it's biodegradable, so but you get that, and then there's a digital download code, but you have that physical thing, and we were talking about just, you know, it's a lot harder to even figure out who's on the album in the age of Spotify, right?
Yeah.
Like the side person, you know, it's so easy to get lost in the mix as a bass player or whatever if you're not the band leader, without that sort of physicality of like looking through, oh, Ray Brown's on this album, oh, Paul Chambers is on this album. How many times did I discover that, you know, in the music library, looking through stuff, or even on CDs? But yeah, it's interesting to see people trying to figure that out. But I do think something's lost in not having that thing that you can like put on the shelf as you're listening to it.
Oh, I totally agree. And the imagery, you know, the great albums you think of, you listen to when you're growing up, especially jazz. You know, you think of the cover of Blue Train when you hear that music. You think of the Kind of Blue, Miles. There's that image. You know, I totally agree with you.
Where are you from originally? Are you from the Pittsburgh area originally?
I am. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I spent the 1 year in Chicago, and then there's about a 4-year period I was basically on the road. But I've been here the whole time, pretty much.
Well, it's interesting. So Pittsburgh's one of those places like Chicago that it's like these Rust Belt cities that have kind of figured it out, more or less, you know. I guess that's a short way of putting it. But, you know, I was struck, like, coming into Pittsburgh, the few times I've been there, you look along the waterfront, and there's all this tech buildup, and,
Yeah.
and it's interesting how that city's reinvented itself. What's it been like over the decades? And I'm just curious because I was in Chicago 23 years, so certainly not my whole life, but more than anywhere else. And even in those 23 years, I saw a big change in terms of like when I go to the Blackstone Hotel,
Yeah.
I would watch my back, as I was leaving and going to, and then 15 years later, I was like living in a townhouse, like almost a mile south of there. And it was this totally different world. What's the city? How's the city changed over the years? What's it been like living there over the long haul?
This is a great city to live in, let me say. There's a reason Pittsburgh has been voted a number of years. It always comes up as like America's most livable city. It's very livable, very walkable. People really know each other, which can be good and bad because the communities are smaller. So like, let's say if you're involved in the jazz community, you tend to know everybody. You've met everybody, you've played with everybody, and there's something really cool about that. And then there's something, that can be a disadvantage at times, but the city, it's still growing. I think the world is still growing in light of recent events, and we're learning that. But I consider myself really fortunate to be here because the jazz community specifically is so strong. It's so like the jazz musicians here can hang with anybody, and there's always been wonderful musical opportunities for me, and it's the kind of city where, unlike New York, I think had I gone to New York or even Chicago, there are niches and kind of slots you can fall in, and I might have fallen into I'm playing jazz. I'm a jazz double bassist, and that would have been what I did, 90% of the time. In Pittsburgh, I can play a Broadway show or 4, and then the next week I can go and make jazz gigs 5 nights a week, and then I can go do a church thing, and then I can go into the studio. I feel like it's a place like this. There's a lot of opportunity, and I was a sad bass player when I was coming up, and it was really like, why are these people, for some reason people kept calling me, but there's a lot of opportunity here. People love the arts here. The people that love the arts would take a bullet for you here. The kind of people you see at gigs, they love what you do. They really appreciate it, and it continues to grow. One thing I would love to see more of is, and I think that internet is partially responsible for this, the disconnect between younger and older people seems to be growing. We used to be a lot more connected in the city and as an arts community, and I feel like there's a lot of younger people that don't connect with the older musicians that have been around for a long time. And I see it with my wife is an actress. I see it with what she's doing too. But the long-winded answer is it's a great city. The tech here, the business here has really made the city beautiful. When I went to an international music camp in, I want to say 1988. My best friend was a drummer growing up. It's the reason I play bass. He was a drummer growing up, and he had family in Winnipeg. So he used to always go to this summer camp in North Dakota I can't remember the name of the city. There was a jazz summer camp on the border of Canada and North Dakota.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I got blank. It's not International Falls. That's Minnesota. But there's one of those Minot, North Dakota or something. One of these far flung.
Yeah, right on the border. And they would bring in, like 7 or 8, musicians from from nearby areas. And then there was always the one guy who was like the third trombone player with Buddy Rich, was like kind of the star of the camp. But he invited me to go with him one year. But this friend of mine, he's responsible for me being a bass player. I totally got off track. I forgot what I was talking about. But just the background of Pittsburgh and Yeah, I apologize. You can.
Oh, no worries.
I'm making your editing harder now.
Well, it's funny though. You got me thinking about North Dakota when you mentioned that. I'll bet it was Minot, North Dakota. Of all the far-flung, apologies to North Dakota residents, but Minot is like off the beaten path. I wonder if it's Minot because I know a few professional musicians from Minot, North Dakota, and I thought like, how the heck did you get into music in Minot? This is like, it's if you take whatever that Amtrak is that goes right along the Canadian border, it goes through Minot, and it is, so I wouldn't be surprised.
I totally remember what I was going to say. So the whole point was when I went there in the 80s, I remember telling people I was from Pittsburgh, and I remember every single person basically going, "Oh, how do you breathe there? It must be so black and the smoke in the air and gray." And I was like, "It's not like that anymore. That was Pittsburgh in the 60s, you know. It's really it's beautiful now. It's really, really beautiful."
Well, we very likely would have moved there. My wife went and interviewed for medical school in Pittsburgh. Wow. That was one of the places, and ended up going to University of Chicago. It just made more sense for both of us to stay in Chicago. But she loved it, and then I've been a few times since. And it's funny because like Chicago has that industrial legacy too. You know, there's this infamous part of the Chicago River called Bubbly Creek, which was bubbly because of all the animal waste dumped into the creek, and it became. But that's I know that it's interesting moving out here to the Bay Area, and I've been here 5 years now. You know, another hub of tech innovation, and that disconnect you were talking about between the younger generation and the older generation. You know, I think San Francisco traditionally it's been a little bit like an East Coast city that got plopped on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. You know, it's got all the institutions, it's got the opera, it's got the symphony, it's got all that. But then in the last few decades, the tech thing has become pretty massive, and so. But that the philanthropy from tech companies tends not to go towards those cultural institutions like it might with other. Now, there's lots of money from other sources, and the symphony and the opera, pre-pandemic at least, were doing fine. But still, you definitely saw a real separation between like quote unquote old San Francisco and then the tech money, and it's a weird place to live as an artist. You know, here there are a lot of things wrong with this place, but one of the big ones, of course, is like the housing cost, and then the stratification where you're literally like you know, person screaming wearing no clothes in front of Facebook or in front of Twitter. You know, it's like the juxtaposition in this country could not be greater than in this city. So, but yeah, it's interesting to. It's just interesting to be a fly on the wall, for all of that. The institutions are strong here, but cities change though. That's just how, if we look throughout history, cities are always evolving.
And cities always have vibes as well. That's why one of the reasons I really want to visit San Francisco. There's so many great musicians from the Bay Area. There's such a vibe out there that I want to check it out. I was supposed to play there. When I played with Stanley Turrentine, they booked a gig at Yoshi's, and I was supposed to be there. And this was probably 2000, I want to say 2000 or 99. It was when there was an earthquake. There was an earthquake that happened, and I was supposed to be on that gig, but I had a prior commitment and I couldn't take that gig. I promised somebody else here that I'd do something with them, and I missed the opportunity to play at one of the great jazz clubs, which I still kick myself about.
Yeah, Yoshi's is amazing. There's still some of those great institutions. It's a place like, it's one of those towns, like so many towns. You talk about San Francisco and people who live here, they're like, "Oh, you should have seen it 5 years ago. It was amazing. It's gone to trash now, but 5 years ago it was, but they've been saying that since 1865, So, and it'll be interesting to see, definitely, and here I am 5 years, so you should have seen it 5 years ago, because it's true. There are a lot of things that have closed in the 5 years since I've lived here, but we'll see. The neighborhood I live in, North Beach, is where all the beatnik poets in the 40s and 50s were located, and traditionally a lot of jazz clubs and the like. And actually, since the pandemic started, a little more activity has been happening. Wow. It's funny because this neighborhood is one of those that whenever our local paper, the San Francisco Chronicle, a a common theme was, look at how crappy North Beach is getting. Like everything's closing and all those great places. And so things have been closing like for the last couple of years anyway, with just housing costs and everything. And actually, these artists, this sort of hippie artist commune, that's probably the wrong way to describe it. They like have an Chase Bank location. They like made a sweetheart deal with them. So there's all this sort of indie art popping up in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So who knows? We'll see when we get through all this what the place looks like. But it was not headed in the direction I think of as great anyway. It was kind of like, you know, the Chipotle's and McDonald's were just about to come in. It seemed like, and maybe we averted that. We'll see. When were you on the road? When were those 4 years? When did that happen in your life?
That was the late 90s, early 2000s. I played bass for Maynard Ferguson. I joined his band. There's another great bass player that just real quickly, I was driving. One thing about Pittsburgh, and I know you've dealt with this because I've heard you talk about it and or read about it, where if the gig is an hour and a half away, you get in your car and you drive an hour and a half away, you know? And so there was a guitarist I was working with in Niles, Ohio, every Thursday night. And I was driving about an hour and 15 minutes to do this gig each way. And he said, one night he said, yeah, Maynard Ferguson's bass player is going to come and I want you to meet him. And his name was Phil Palumbi, who's a great New York bass player. And we met. It was really cool. He sat in and everything. He said, yeah, give me your number. We'll stay in touch. He called me a week later and he said, I'm leaving Maynard Ferguson's band and I recommended you for it. And I was like, I don't know what to do, because I wanted to move to New York. I was kind of saving money and I planned to do that. And I asked a bunch of musicians that I respected, older musicians, and they all said, take the gig. You never know when something like this is going to happen, and you don't know what kind of doors it's going to open for you. So I played with Maynard, started playing with him in '97, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was almost 2 years, and the people I met, the places I got to go, and it was a different time. There's never, I think that's over for now. As far as young musicians, there were like 17 of us on a bus doing one-nighters. Mostly, you play a gig, you get in the bus, go to sleep. The bus would drive all night. You get to the next gig. They'd set up at the high school or the college or wherever we were playing. And it was like that for 3 months at a time. It was unbelievable. And I got to go to Europe. I played Ronnie Scott's for 2 weeks in London, which was like one of the great experiences with Maynard Ferguson, and we went, the only time I've ever been to Japan, it was with Maynard Ferguson. We played the Montreux Jazz Festival, which was unbelievable. And Maynard was one of the most beautiful people you ever meet in your life. He was 100% off stage who he was on stage. He was a beautiful, beautiful guy. That was that experience. And then we would take breaks where we would have, 2-3 weeks off. And one time I had a break and I got a gig. There was somebody from Pittsburgh who had moved to Long Island, and they were kind of a co-head of like a chemistry kind of a company. And they used to do a big fundraiser every year where they would bring in Pittsburgh jazz musicians because of the connection. So one year, somebody called me to do it. A great trombone player here who just passed away named Harold Betters. He asked me to play it with him. So I said, great. It paid great money. I just had to drive up there. They were going to put us up. And I found out Stanley Turrentine was going to be playing. So they contacted me. His wife was his manager. His wife said, oh, you want to play with Stanley and make some more money? And I said, great. Yeah, I'd love to. So I played with Stanley. The gig was okay as far as I thought. I thought I probably sounded bad. Drove home, and then she called me up and she said, we're playing the Blues Alley in 2 weeks. Do you want to do it? And I was like, of course, because it worked out with Maynard, the tour. Like I could play Blues Alley and then leave for another tour with Maynard. And then she called me back. I hung up. She called me back 10 minutes later. She said, the Blue Note, we're playing the Blue Note a week after that. Can you do it? And I thought for about 10 seconds, well, not even 10 seconds. It felt like 10 minutes and probably 1.5 seconds. I said, yeah, I can do it. So I took because I didn't know, oh my goodness, there's a ball rolling here. So then I contacted Maynard, and they were very cool. I had another bass player, a great bass player who's in New York right now, who's originally from this area, named Nathan Peck. He plays with the guitarist Alex Skolnick. He was really into it, so he came out on the road kind of my last week, and he watched how everything went, and rehearsed with the band. So I could literally pass the baton to him and go and play with Stanley. So that's how I went right from playing with Maynard right to playing with Stanley, which was a totally different. Maynard's thing was kind of a little big band. You're sharing a room with somebody always. You're surrounded by people. You're on a tour bus. Stanley's thing was flying out to gigs. I got my own room, which was amazing. I was getting paid in cash after every gig. There was all these differences. I was getting to play more musically. The room I got to kind of play jazz. It was a little more prestigious as far as the gigs we were doing, but they were both of those guys are two of the greatest musicians I've ever been on stage with. They had this innate ability to make everybody else better. That was something I've always taken with me, is the great musicians don't just sound good. They don't just play great on their own. They have this ability that when you pair them with other people, they somehow make the other people sound way better than they ever could. And Stanley and Maynard were both like that. They both elevated everybody that was on stage with them.
Isn't that cool that people can do that? I know exactly what you're talking about in all sorts of musical contexts. It's a hard to define or articulate thing, but there are people that just their shine kind of and you see that in the classical world with conductors. All of a sudden, it's like that orchestra sounds different. They sound like Todd Koopman is this wonderful from the Netherlands, I think, conductor, comes and conducts the San Francisco Symphony. I was playing with him. God, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it was like probably a year ago at this point. And they sound like a different orchestra.
Yeah.
It's funny how that can. So what after those like 4 years of really being on the road, what's the road been like for you with your career subsequently? Like, did you consciously decide I want to base myself more in Pittsburgh and then go on the road occasionally, or like have you done a lot of touring since then, or what's that been like for you?
Well, it's just since then life happened for me.
Sure.
Like seriously, things in my life have kind of dictated what's going on. So I got off the road because, and this is a sad story, because Stanley Turrentine passed away while we were on a gig. We were playing at the Blue Note in 2000, and at the Blue Note, I'm not sure how they structure it now, but music was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You play the whole week except for Monday. And so we did the whole week. Saturday night, he was killing. We played an encore. We played a tune he wrote called La Play Street, and he was destroyed. Like he was playing on the highest level ever. And then the next day, I had a hotel that was just around the corner. I was in a hotel. I came to the gig Sunday night, and the club was half empty, and it was dead silent, and everybody was looking somber. And I was just like, what's happening? And somebody looked at me and said, didn't you hear? And I said, hear what? They said, Judith, his wife, Judith found him in the bathroom on the floor. He had a stroke. And I said, what? So like I drove home the next day, not knowing what was going to happen. And unfortunately, he had another stroke, as you know, that happens sometimes, and he passed away. So I came back home, and great community here right away. Some musicians, oh, you're back home. I started working. I started playing. There's a theater company I've played with for years. They were like, oh, you're around. We need a bass player. Come and play for us. So I had work. And then I met my wife almost 20 years ago in 2001. And I wasn't sure about what I was going to do. I was still in my 20s. And my wife encouraged me to start teaching. And of course, my response as a 20-something was, I'm not a teacher. I'm a player. You know, I didn't understand how much you get out of it, you know, and how much it's given back to me. even as a player to teach. So I started teaching a little bit. And then very soon after, I started having these weird things physically happening to me. I was getting bouts of vertigo, particularly at night, but when it was bedtime and I was kind of sleepy, I started slurring my speech. I had no idea what that was about. So I went to a doctor. I went through every single test imaginable, where they put nodes on your head and everything. And the neurologist I was seeing, he said, well, we still don't know what it is. You could have MS, but we don't know unless we can give you a spinal tap. So I had a spinal tap and I was diagnosed with MS. Which was terrifying. It was terrifying to me. This is early 2000s. And I didn't know what was going to happen. They put me on medication, and the medication at the time was giving myself an injection every other night, which stinks. Anybody who's ever had to give themselves an injection, I want to say you never get used to that. You never get used to it. It's not fun. But I can, you can rotate which part of your body you do it. So you rotate every other night, and the medicine kind of would give me these it was like I had the flu every other day. I would have my temperature would go up, my head would hurt. But so I was diagnosed with MS, which it really put the brakes on everything for me. I had to reassess. It was affecting me a little bit on gigs. Before my diagnosis, I would have things where I would barely feel it. I would barely get numb in the tips of my fingers. And my neurologist thinks that saved me. The fact that I was a musician and I was working with such fine muscles allowed me to really know that something was happening. If I was someone who lifted heavy things or did extremely physical, the fact that I was dealing with really micro muscles like we do as musicians allowed me to see something is wrong here. So I was diagnosed, I was put on medication. I have something called relapsing remitting MS, which is my neurologist calls it pain in the ass MS, which means I'm on medication. I might see what you would consider a flare up every few years, which I really, knock on wood, I haven't had a problem with as far as flare ups. I have to be conscious of getting too hot. Extreme heat can make me feel like I'm going to be sick. And I have to stay healthy. So I'm like working out has become as important as practicing music for me at this point. But I've been living with it for almost 20 years. And there's a lot of people that live with it. And it's almost like no two people that you ever meet will have the similar experience with MS. It's such a specific individual disease, the way that it attacks somebody's body. But fortunately, I haven't seen any major problems in a long, long time. Like I said, my doctor said, stay strong, stay healthy. So that, long story short, that's why I ended up being here. My wife taught at a performing arts middle school here in Pittsburgh, and they had an opening for a string teacher. They needed a low string teacher, someone to teach bass and cello, which was an instrument I never even touched. And she was like, you need to do it. These are little kids. You can totally do it. So I started. I got a cello and I did the interview where they kind of watched me teach a lesson. And fortunately, they watched me teach a bass lesson and not a cello lesson. So I got in. I started teaching at this middle school one day a week, performing arts middle school. And eventually, the people at the high school knew about me because I went to the performing arts high school here, and they had been asking about me coming over there. So after teaching at the middle school, I went over to the high school, and it became a 5-day-a-week gig, but it's an adjunct position, so it's like 3 hours a day. It was perfect. It was like go in at 12:30, teach for until the end of the day when the kids do arts. And that experience, being at CAPA, which is now, they've consolidated the middle and the high school here, so it's a 6 through 12. So on a couple days a week, I work with really young kids in the morning, giving them private lessons. And then the afternoon, I get to do private bass lessons, but I also direct one of the jazz bands. I teach music history, which has been really cool. I really love it. And I direct, of all things, the sax ensemble, because the guy I replaced was a saxophone teacher, and he directed the group. So they were like, basically, you're going to direct this group. These are the kids who can't be in orchestra. This is during orchestra. You're going to direct this group. And my kids always make fun of me because I can't. They say when I fake play saxophone with my hands in the air that I don't even do that right. That I can't even, But it's really, that gig is about ensemble playing. How can we balance? How can we play in tune? It's those kind of things that we do in that group. So I've done that since '05, and it's been a joy. And in addition to that, the college I went to, Duquesne University.
Yeah.
They reached out to me, the head of the jazz department. Hey, come and teach jazz. So I have a few students. I'm an adjunct there. I do a 1 day a week thing with students there, and I teach students at WVU 1 day a week, which is, so I'm doing teaching things in the day, and there's still a lot of great music. The jazz, I keep telling you, man, the jazz community here is off the chain. There are some really, really great musicians here that people probably don't know about. And I really consider myself fortunate to play with them. I consider myself fortunate to still be playing with this theater company that hired me when I was 19 years old. So when they do shows, usually I'm on the first call list. Hey, we're going to do Hairspray. Are you available these dates? I would love to. That's actually something I want to talk about on my channel. I'm going to do an episode about how you mark up a Broadway book.
Ooh, I can't wait.
There are some.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There seems to be a standard way, and there are ways that people don't know how to do that. So I'm going to talk about that at some point. But there's a lot of great work here. Every once in a while, I'll get an opportunity to travel. I've gone to play recently in the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix. I don't know if you've been there. They have this huge thing called the octabass, which is as big as a room.
Yeah, I need to get there. I haven't been there yet. I saw Davey 504 play that bass.
Yeah, it's amazing. The whole facility is amazing. But I've gone out there to play a few times. So there are instances where I'll get to travel and play every once in a while, which is really thrilling. But the gist of what I do now is during the day I'm teaching, and pre-COVID in a city like Pittsburgh, I was playing 5-6 nights a week, and I loved it. I miss it greatly, but I'm still, right now I'm teaching virtually. I'm teaching Monday through Friday virtually with my kids.
Man. Well, it's well. Thank you for carving out time. You are a busy guy, but it's you're living like the classic musician lifestyle, successful musician lifestyle, and right. So you're teaching, and I love that you're teaching, and I can relate to this back when I was living in Chicago, because you're teaching the whole gamut. You're teaching from elementary school age through college performance. And what an interesting experience that must be. It makes, thinking back to my own experiences, it makes me realize how broad a term like teaching is, or being a teacher, like the skills you use in all those different modalities. Like when I would look into like a general music classroom, not that you're doing that, but when I look at that, and then I was conducting high school orchestra, I thought these aren't even like in the same ballpark in terms of the skills. My degree says I could do that, but I could never do that. I guess I could trial by fire do it, but it must be so interesting working with, for me particularly, that gap between, I was teaching high school orchestras, I was working with 17, 18-year-olds, then I was teaching at DePaul, I was teaching 18, 19-year-olds, and what a vast just sort of maturity difference that 1 year or 6 months or whatever can make. It's funny because they're like basically the exact same age, but they're just, those points in your life between that K-12 and that college experience, and the way they learn and the response, that was one of the things that always stuck out to me when I was doing teaching like that.
Oh, totally. But there are similarities. I love when they get something and you see the light bulb come on. When you see somebody really grab something at any level, it feels like yes. And then I've seen at almost every level that kind of, that thing you gave me to work on last week, I didn't do it. I'm sorry. There's also the dog ate my homework thing. That seems to transcend, whatever grade you're in.
Well, so I would love. Okay, so since you brought that up, I would love to know how you respond to that, because I've had. Okay, if we rewind to like 25-year-old Jason teaching at UW Whitewater, I would get frustrated with the students when they would do that. I remember I even would like angrily scrawl something on their music. You know, it never worked. And over the year, maybe I'm just a big softy, but I have never. The older I get, the less I ever admonish a student for anything. It's all like trying to find a way to light that spark.
Yeah.
And I think one of my when I was teaching high school, we had to have goals for the year that we'd have to write down. One of mine was developing intrinsic motivation in the students, which is I thought it was a good goal. I don't know if I did it or not, but like trying to figure out how to make them want to do that. Like, this might be the wrong way to look at it, but a lot of the time I would like look inward. Oh, well, maybe I didn't do a good job of picking the right piece for them, getting excited about that. And not that it's all on me, but like yelling at them never seemed, I'm just not a yeller. And when I did, it never seemed to work. And so I don't know, just thinking about motivation, do you have any thoughts on that, or what are your experiences with that?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's very similar to playing music and jazz, where you might feel like you took a good solo, or, you played a great chorus. And then there's moments you're like, that sucked. And I have moments. There are moments like that teaching where you're like, I prepared, or I came up with something and you really knocked it out of the park. And then moments like, that was awful. That was a dud. I could tell that they weren't interested in this at all. So it has ups and downs, but I try to really diversify. One of the keys with my young kids, and I found they love this. They love being together. Middle school, high school. They love it when, rather than individual lessons all the time, they love it if I break it up maybe once a month and get them all together. Let's talk about bass playing. Let's talk about what kind of difficulties you're having. Let's all watch this video together. They love being a community. They love studying together. Let's play for each other. Play your jury piece or whatever for your peers. They really love interacting with one another. That's one way I'll break it up. But sometimes I'll, out of the blue, let's just do an electric bass lesson. And the kids will get excited. Oh, okay. You change direction on them, and it seems to stimulate what they're doing. Things can, and we know this as professional musicians, right? Say you're practicing something, things can get stale, even when you're practicing alone, doing your maintenance regimen. Sometimes you're just like, okay, I need to take a break. I need to reset, reboot. So I try to keep them on their toes. There's definitely things we work with. I feel being a good teacher means you have a trajectory. You have to have a trajectory for the student, and not just, okay, hey, try some of this, try some of this, try some of this. No, and goals. That's one of the things I make all my kids do. I make all of them write me a 1-year goal, a 5-year goal, a 10-year goal. Where do you want to see yourself realistically? Let's get it written down so you can look at it and it's actually physical. But, so I try to keep them motivated. It's about stimulation, changing things up. Maybe I have a kid who wants to be a jazz musician and we're really working on jazz. And then all of a sudden I'm like, we need to sit down and watch Edgar Meyer because you need to check this out. This will change your life. Or a kid who's really working, on Dragonetti or something. And I'm like, let's look, this Christian McBride thing that I just saw the other day is unbelievable. You need to check this out. Or here's a Paul Chambers head. Let's just do this. All of a sudden, I think you need to change it up. Keep them stimulated and recognize when things are going to be stale. Don't try to fit the square peg into the round hole because that's the way it's supposed to be done. Don't try to do that. Keep them going on the trajectory, but change up every once in a while.
Yeah, it's amazing how much more of a like an improvisation teaching can be in terms of just like reading the room. And I found in my very limited teaching I do these days, I found myself with this remote teaching doing a lot more of, hey, let's check out these videos, and just the fact that we're staring at a screen. I've been doing a lot more like things I probably should have been doing anyway, but we'd have to put the basses down and walk over to the computer. Well, I'm remembering back to maybe 6 years ago when I was taking my orchestra to the Midwest Clinic, which is this big, it's like winning the Super Bowl for high school orchestras or bands. Maybe that's a bad analogy, but that's probably somewhat on point. And we were working on Tchaikovsky 5, the finale, and I taught at a place where if I generalize the students, they'd be incredibly talented, but sitting there like cross-legged, leaning back in their chair, like playing really well, chewing gum, like good, but there's and so I decided that one day I found this incredible high school orchestra, so their age, playing that piece and physically engaged in the music. And all I did, they walked in, we set up, and I don't even know if I said anything. I just played that video, and you saw all the kids go, "Oh." So something about seeing their age, playing that piece, not the Berlin Philharmonic, a bunch of people in their 40s and 50s, but so that was a really cool moment. And I love that you do this saxophone ensemble. It was trial by fire for me as I got into the wind world, because one of my jobs was teaching symphonic band, which was almost 100 people, and that was the goof off band. That's when you don't care about band, but your parents make you stay in band. So I developed this skill of kicking a kid out of band while still keeping conducting, which
that's great.
Which I never. One of my first days on the job, the head band director, he was like opening up the scores and he was going through the stuff and talking through, and then he just looked at me in the eyes and he started laughing and he said, "Just don't stop much." So just thinking about like that saxophone, like what's it been like working with something that you, like you said, don't play? Like having working with what's it been like working with the saxophone ensemble, directing something like that?
Oh, it's been totally incredible. Another musical muscle that I've had a chance to develop. So one of the reasons I was hired when they brought me in for the interview was that could I write things on finale? That was something that they wanted. They wanted, can you bring in arrangements? Can you do arrangements? And I saw it as like okay, I can write arrangements now if I want to. And I really started doing that. I started learning about voicings and being idiomatic with each instrument. And it's been an unbelievable kind of creative release for me. And one of the high points of doing it was back in, I want to say 2008. One of my colleagues, who's an outstanding trumpet player, his name is James Moore. He's a dean of music down at West Virginia Wesleyan College. I brought him in to do the Birth of the Cool. I arranged the entire Miles Davis Birth of the Cool album for the saxophone ensemble. I brought in my friend James to be Miles Davis, and we played the whole album. We did a night where we played the entire album, and there's a couple of clips of that. I want to say 3 or 4 clips on my YouTube, from 12 years ago that I uploaded. Sure. And that was one of the heights for me creatively. That was as great as playing a really tremendous gig. I got the same feeling. I got the same kind of fulfillment because I got to be involved with the arranging. I put the music together. I put the whole band together and booking the hall and really making that event happen. So the saxophone ensemble continues to be, it's daunting at times. I'm still working with 15, 16, 17-year-olds who have to stay mentally stimulated. And there's nothing quite, and I'm sure you know this experience, there's nothing quite trying to get a teenager to play some music that they don't like and or have no interest in whatsoever, and could care, there's nothing like trying to get kids to be motivated to make it sound good and play music like that. So it's constantly looking and trying to find things, but it's really fine-tuning the ensemble, which has made me better as a musician. It's made me a better listener. My conducting chops are 100,000 times better than they were 10 years ago. I can really deal with conducting. In fact, somebody asked me to arrange some strings for a hip hop album, which I did. And then they wanted me to come in the studio and conduct. And I was just like, I'm cool with that. I've been doing this for X number of years now. But also, like I said, arranging, like really understanding music from the inside, and not just this bottom up kind of thing that we deal with as bass players, but a top down kind of thing as well. Like it's made me a better musician in the end, putting the bass down and dealing with other things. There have been times when, I feel like my calluses are getting soft, and I better pick this up and put some work in. It's everything is in waves, but it's made me definitely a stronger musician, and more creative on a certain level.
Well, it's funny. The more we talk, the more I realize we have in common. Because like I also moved into the world of doing more arranging, which felt like back when I was in the high school job, especially, which felt like it opened up a whole new universe. Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can make anything happen.
Yeah.
And then doing more and more conducting. And what you're describing, you're like a 21st century Beethoven in some ways. Because you think about those people, you go back to that era though, right? They're booking the gig, they're doing the arrangement, the composition, they're finding the musicians, they're rehearsing, they're conducting.
I teach music history, and my kids, we talked this week. I started Bach, and listen, this is what Bach had to do. Bach had to teach Latin grammar, and the kids are like, "What? Yeah, he taught Latin grammar, and he had to play organ for this, and he had to write music for every holiday and every Sunday, and 5 churches, and the whole thing." And this is what you have to do. We all have to juggle all these plates, and it seems like at times this plate number 2 is getting more attention than the other 5, and then you go to plate number 4, and it's amazing, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love it.
Well, I love digging into those letters of Bach where he's just complaining about money, endlessly. It's just funny. It makes you think about the business of music and how little maybe has changed. You mentioned something that I've thought about a lot over the years with the teenagers. I hate that piece kind of a line, which when I first that drove me absolutely insane when I first started teaching, and I think that's a natural reaction maybe among certainly the kids I've worked with over the years. And one of my 2 students right now, it's funny because that's like her line for everything. Not directly to me for what I give her, but like everything she's talking about in orchestra. And I know she doesn't really, but it's just like the unfamiliar, And I was in an orchestra clinic 5-6 years ago, whatever. And there's a conductor named Kevin No at Michigan. I think University of Michigan now is where he's at. But it was really cool because he specializes in new music and works with a lot of high school groups. And he was working on this piece with this group, and you could just tell the vibe in the group is like not super into it. And he stopped, and he was working, and then he said, like, "What do you think of this piece? Like, who here hates this piece, just hates it?" And a couple hands went up, and who here is like, nah, whatever. And then like, who's totally into this piece? And like one hand went up, and he had a really good, just like 5-minute discussion of just like why. And it was totally detached, not like, this is not my piece, you're not insulting me. Let's just talk about this piece of music. And I thought that was a really cool way. I didn't teach long enough to use that skill a lot in my own life, but I thought that was a really cool way to dig into that, because again, I would just find myself battling 15-year-olds trying to force them to like something, which is a losing battle for me, at least.
No, you have to change it up. And I would try things when we were in person. I would do things like bringing my bass in to play with the kids often. I also, my entire musical rearing, basically up until the 9th grade, was on trumpet. And I played trumpet all throughout high school. The bass was an instrument like I was allowed to play. It wasn't until I was about 11th grade where I was like, I'm a bass player, this is what I want to do. But it was always a situation where a band director would find out that I played trumpet and like, okay, you're in the band now, we need a trumpet player. But sometimes I'll bring my trumpet in and I'll play trumpet with the sax ensemble kids. Sometimes we do a circle. There's a kind of a technique that's really being utilized in our school district right now, where you do a circle, you sit in a circle and you have discussions with the kids, and you kind of pass a totem back and forth so that the speaker is the person talking, and we'll have discussions about music, we'll have discussions about politics of the time, we'll have discussions about how the kids are feeling. I also show them, I feel like it's my duty to show them, you need to see John Coltrane. You need to see this movie of John Coltrane. If you're playing saxophone, you need to see Charlie Parker. You need to know who that is. I need to give you a history lesson, or a tune. We're going to play Mood Indigo by Duke Ellington. Let's talk about that. Listen to this version of Mood Indigo and tell me what you think. I mean, there's a lot of ways teaching has really, I think, evolved from this kind of here's what I'm telling you to do and you do it kind of thing, to where we have to be fluid, to keep kids' minds engaged. And there's so many angles we can hit it from that it's cool to investigate that,
Yeah, it's such a great. There's, I mean, obviously, so many reasons that why teaching is a beautiful thing. For me, it's been nice. It's been good at keeping me humble. Not that I have like a huge ego, but at keeping me grounded and keeping me just feeling like I'm part of the community and part of like there. I remember I was working on some project on my laptop maybe 2 years ago here in San Francisco, and then I was doing. This was a year where I was coaching a ton of kids in the middle schools.
Yeah,
which is not my jam typically that age. But I'm working on something and I'm like all up in my head working on some project, and then I walk in and a middle schooler wearing a backpack like runs directly into me. I'm like, boom! And it's just like the two worlds. I was like, in this whatever intellectual kind of world, and then here we are in the real world, like kid wiping his nose, running directly into me. It's but there's something that's beautiful about that. So, man, we've got to. I don't want to eat up your whole day, and I know you're teaching today, but man, it's we should have done this years ago. I'm so appreciative of you for carving out some time.
No, I appreciate you reaching out to me. Like I said, your show is important. It's bringing a lot of us together. It's keeping us informed, and it's been wonderful to talk to you. A lot of people out there love your show, including me. So please don't ever stop doing it. It's very important.
Paul, thank you so much. This is the sort of conversation that left me smiling and feeling positive, and all the things that are such a struggle, particularly in 2020, late 2020, as Paul and I were talking here. Definitely check out Paul's YouTube channel. I think that goes without saying. His website, everything he's up to. And yeah, wow. We're definitely going to find a way to collaborate, Paul and I, in the future on YouTube and perhaps in other ways as well. It's such a big world, such a wide world out there, the world of music, the world of the bass, and there's such an abundance of opportunities that you can create yourself, and I think that's never been the case more than right at this moment when you have the ability to create your own TV show on YouTube, to create your own radio station-ish on a podcast, to put out your material in the way that you can right now. It's just so exciting for me to see what people are up to see how people are seizing this moment in particular, because it's such a bizarro moment, but just what they're doing in the music world in general. So I find what Paul's doing so inspiring, and yeah, check him out. What else is going on? I record these outros in batches, and for the last 6 months or so, I have not allowed myself to edit them. So warts and all, they go out in the world. It is December 30th as I record these. I've got a couple more to do, and then I'm working on a video review of Hal Robinson's new version of The Quad, which is this very cool excerpt series. I've been putting out 2 to 3 YouTube videos a week. I'm not obligating myself to do that. I would like to at least put out one a week, but the pace has been a little bit faster since I have so little to do, I guess, and so much to do. I do find my days quite full, and I'm trying to make sure that I schedule time to relax. One of the positive challenges of my current life is that what I do as work, let's just call this work, it essentially is also what I like to do for fun. So my work and what I would want to be doing with my time anyway, the Venn diagram overlaps quite a bit, maybe not totally. There are some things I do professionally that I would probably not do, but it's probably like 5% or less of what I do in any given day. So even on these holiday days like this, I do find myself, if I'm not careful, hunched over the computer, animating characters in Adobe After Effects, or cutting out different historical figures and photoshopping different heads and other bodies, and cutting out arms and putting bodies that don't exist behind the arms. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out some of my, I'm calling it Stupid Bass History, though I may change that name because I feel like that's a little disrespectful. But I've been doing these. Who was Bottazzini? Who was Dragonetti? Who was Dittersdorf? I have a list of another several dozen that I'm doing, and they're so fun for me to put together and to research. But I find myself all of a sudden I look up and it's a Saturday. I've been working on it since 6 a.m. and it's 4 p.m. Now, that's cool. I mean, but you know, if you just zoom out a little bit, that is perhaps not sustainable and perhaps not the best way to have a balanced life. So I am trying during this holiday break right here, which my wife is off more or less this week and part of last week, and I am trying to be off when she's off. I am trying to just sit around and watch movies and play Civilization 6 on my iPad and go on extended walks with the dog. And I feel that when I do that, I have that rejuvenated feeling. I feel refreshed. I feel anxious, probably is the wrong word, but eager to dig into what I've got on the calendar for the next week. So I am trying to keep that balance, even though I'm spending so much time at home. And if I look, zoom out, wow, boy, I'm rambling here. Okay, I will wrap this up soon. But as I zoom out and realize that all pandemics do end and I will be traveling again, I doubt that I'll be putting out 2 to 3 YouTube videos a week. I hope to continue to do 1 a week and just have some sort of regular practice like that. But I really look forward to incorporating more video into these sort of interviews that I do. I'm thinking about cameras for when I go on the road, and I'm thinking about doing more journalistic documentary sort of stuff where I go to a city and I spend a couple weeks there. And I had such a great time doing that in Australia and New York City. Those were the 2 main trips I did that in the last couple of years. I'd like to continue to do more of those, maybe 1 to 2 a year, maybe more. We'll see. And yeah, I'm thinking about the future. I'm excited about the future. I'm sick of wearing a mask and walking around, and my instinct every time I see a human is to run as far away as possible. I think that's deeply, deeply unhealthy to my soul. You can probably relate. But I'm trying to take a long view. I'm trying to be stoic. I'm trying to remember that this too shall pass. I give myself, I think I've said this in these outros before, but if I was going to grade myself on handling the pandemic, externally, you might give me an A or an A minus or something like that. I would definitely give myself a C at best, or maybe a C plus on a good day. I don't feel like I'm handling this as well as I probably could. When I'm talking to people socially, it's certainly for the podcast, I think that I put on a good face, and I never say anything that's not true or on these podcasts. If I start lying, I talk about too many things to keep track of my lies. So I just have to be 100% honest in how I feel. And I am, but I'm also being honest here. I have some bad, I'm not handling it probably as well as I wish I could, but I'm trying not to be too hard on myself also. Okay. Wow. That went in a weird direction. I'm going to exit this outro and thank the team who has been working with me on these podcasts over the years. Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, and Krista Copper. Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. MitchMooring.com is his website. Just check out what he's up to. He's an inspiring person. He's just got a great drive and hustle and all the good things. I can't wait to see what he continues to do in the future. I am your host, Jason Heath. Goodbye, 2020, and we will see you again soon for more life in the low end of the spectrum.